It was supposed to be just another Sunday. Just another family barbecue. You know the kind, kids running around barefoot, a cooler full of cheap beer, someone always burning the hot dogs. But as I stepped through the side gate into the backyard, I felt it again. That tightening in my chest. Like I was walking into enemy territory instead of a family gathering. The smell of grilled meat hung thick in the warm Denver air. The patio lights were already glowing, even though the sun hadn't quite dipped. Everything looked postcard perfect. But under that layer of charm, I could feel it. Eyes grazing over me without landing. Conversations shifting as I got closer. No one offered a drink. No one hugged me. I hadn't even put down my purse before I felt it. My place wasn't really here. I was a guest. A tolerated one. Not family, not anymore. Just the woman in the guest room. Marissa waved at me from across the yard, smile tight like plastic wrap over old leftovers. Her husband, Dorian, was holding court near the grill, flipping burgers like he owned the place. Which he did. And he never let you forget it. I hovered near the drink table, listening to forced laughter and clinking glasses. Someone I barely remembered called out, "Still living with them, huh, Laurie? Must be nice, rent-free life." I smiled. Said nothing. Not because I agreed. But because I knew if I spoke, I'd spill something I couldn't take back. Marissa passed by me twice and didn't stop. Just a quick pat on my shoulder. Like I was a coat rack she needed to acknowledge. I offered to help in the kitchen. Got waved off. "You're our guest, Laurie. Relax." The smile didn't touch their eyes. The message was clear, we don't need you. Not even your help. Then Dorian clinked his beer bottle against a spatula and turned to the group. "Hey, folks. Before we all get too full to move, I've got a little housekeeping." He grinned, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Laurie, hey, where's Laurie?" I froze. My name hung in the air like smoke. "There she is. Laurie, we've all loved having you. Really. But I think it's time we talk next steps. You know, either keep the guest room. Or find a new place. It's been a while." People laughed nervously. Someone coughed. A baby started crying. I just stood there. My skin burned. My fingers curled into my palms. My voice was calm when I finally said, "We had an agreement." Marissa said. He held up his hand. Yeah. Stay as long as you need. But needs change. We all grow, right?" I turned to Marissa. She couldn't meet my eyes. It hit harder than I expected. I nodded, backed away. My legs carried me inside the house without asking permission from my pride. The walls muffled the party. The laughter felt far away. I walked into the kitchen, leaned on the counter. The tile was cold under my fingertips. I remembered the night I moved in. Marissa hugged me and said, "You're not alone. This is your home too." I believed her. We used to share a room as kids. I took care of her when she was sick. I covered for her when she snuck out to meet boys. But now? I was excess weight. I pulled a paper towel, dabbed the corners of my eyes. "You're not a burden," I whispered. "You're not invisible." The voices outside grew louder. I didn't want to go back out, but I needed air. Needed dignity. As I walked past the hallway, I heard them. "Marissa, she'll figure something out. She always does." "Dorian, I hope she doesn't drag it out. I've got plans for that room." Plans. Like I was clutter to be cleared. I stepped back outside. Dorian was mid-joke, making everyone laugh. Then his phone buzzed. He pulled it from his pocket, glanced at it, and everything changed. His mouth stopped moving. His hand, mid-gesture, dropped to his side. His eyes met mine. Not smug. Not amused. But stunned. Like he'd just seen a ghost wearing my face. "What?" I asked. My voice was low, calm, even. "Something wrong?" He didn't answer. Just stood there, looking at me like he knew something I didn't. And for the first time, I didn't feel small. I felt dangerous. After everyone went back inside, the house settled into its usual hush, but it wasn't peace. It was the kind of silence that comes after a staged performance, where everyone knows their lines and exits, and no one dares talk about what happened on stage. I went to my room, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at the pattern on the quilt, feeling the sting still sitting behind my ribs. I kept replaying it, Dorian's tone, the way he twisted the moment to make me the aggressor, and that flash of panic on his face when the phone buzzed. He masked it fast, but I caught it. That wasn't about me. That was about something else, something he didn't want exposed. The worst part? How quickly everyone carried on. Napkins picked up, drinks refreshed, small talk resumed like my humiliation hadn't happened. Like I hadn't stood there, gutted and cornered in front of family. It wasn't even about being ignored. I was erased. I muttered aloud, there's a difference between being invisible and being erased. Tonight, I was both. And it wasn't the first time. I'd felt this before. Holidays when I didn't bring a date. Birthday dinners where no one asked what I was working on. I've always been the gap they filled with a polite smile and silence, just enough to say I was included, not enough to be real. It wasn't until tonight I saw the pattern. Every time they needed to present a unified front, I was the outlier, the weight to cut loose. I thought about who I used to be, quiet, apologetic, someone who made herself small so others could breathe easy. That Laurie is fading now. This new version? She's not yelling. She's watching. And she's writing things down. I wasn't even supposed to be living here long term. After the divorce, Marissa invited me to stay. You need a soft place to land, she said, arms wide like a savior. And at first, she meant it. The first few weeks felt warm, like family should. But then things shifted. My toothbrush moved without me. My clothes folded and stacked outside the guest room door. Notes on the fridge started appearing, don't forget trash day. Use your own detergent. At first, I thought I was imagining it. Then Dorian started inserting himself into everything, what time I used the kitchen, when I did laundry, who I could invite over. One evening a month ago, I was walking past the office and overheard him on the phone. Yeah, he said, she'll be out before summer's over. I've got it handled. I remember freezing. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't angry. He was calm, like someone placing a grocery order. I told Marissa the next morning. She blinked at me, yawned, and said, Dorian's under pressure. Don't read into everything. Like his words were just static. And I, like a fool, let it go. That choice cost me. My silence gave him room to write the story the way he wanted. A few hours after the barbecue, sometime past midnight, I couldn't sleep. I got up, padded into the hallway, heading to the kitchen. On the way, I passed the garage. The door wasn't fully closed, and light spilled out. Then I heard him. Dorian's voice, low and careful. No, she's not family. She's technically a guest. I checked, legally, we're safe. He paused. The other voice on the call was muffled, but Dorian continued, she doesn't have a claim. Sentimental as she is, she won't push back. People like her? They fold. My hand was on the kitchen counter. I'd stopped breathing. Not family. Safe, because I didn't matter. I stepped back, slowly, making sure the wood floors didn't creak. As I turned toward my room, I felt something inside me still, like a current finding ground. Not grief. Not even betrayal. Clarity. That was all I needed. Back in my room, I sat down, opened my laptop, and started pulling everything together. Every Venmo receipt, every grocery list, every thank you text from Marissa for picking up the slack. I had photos of their kids I'd driven to school, screenshots of chore schedules with my name scribbled across every other day. I wasn't gathering dirt. I was gathering proof. I thought like a lawyer, not a sister. Not a guest. I mapped out my contributions, timelines, conversations. Not for court. For myself. There was a piece of me that wanted to leave in silence. To pack my bag, slip out, keep my dignity intact. But another voice, one deeper, older, said, why give them that victory? I created a document entitled it, What They Didn't Expect I Kept. Then I thought of my mother. Her voice on the phone the week before she passed, silence can be a kind of shield, Laurie. But if you're not careful, it becomes your burial. I looked around the room. My suitcase sat under the bed, half packed since June. But I didn't reach for it. This wasn't about staying or leaving. This was about reclaiming the version of me that doesn't get edited out of family portraits. I backed up the files to a drive and emailed copies to myself. Just in case. I didn't feel scared. I felt steady. I picked up my phone and called Tara, an old colleague turned attorney. She answered on the second ring. Hey, Laurie, you okay? I have a question, I said. What does it take to be considered a legal tenant in Colorado? There was a pause. Depends, she said. How long have you been there? 6 months. Contributed to bills, kept receipts, no written lease. Another pause. You might have more rights than they realize. Want me to look into it? Not yet, I said. Just needed to know if I was crazy. You're not. I ended the call. Then I stood up, walked to the door, and opened it. The hallway was still. I stepped out, not on tiptoe. Not like a guest. On the wall near the stairs hung the family photo. Marissa in front, Dorian stiff beside her, the kids smiling bright. I was on the edge, barely lit. I stared at it, straightened the frame, and said under my breath, funny how the one who's not family is the one holding all the receipts. Then I walked down the hallway. When I woke up, the house was silent in that sharp before dawn kind of way. The guests from yesterday were still out there somewhere, kids fast asleep, adults clearing plates, laughter boxed up for tomorrow. I walked into the kitchen without turning on the lights. My coffee mug wasn't where it usually sat. Instead, that spot was empty. My placemat was gone too. The chair looked as though someone had just slid it out. Marissa and Dorian were already there, voices low. I paused, listening harder than I'd ever listened before. Dorian said good morning with the exact tone you use when you're about to fire someone. And I didn't blink. I just watched them. I realized peace without justice is just silence with lipstick. At breakfast I hovered near the cereal and fruit bowl. I offered to make orange juice. Marissa waved me off with a polite nod, as if I were a waiter. I sat down quietly. Across from me Dorian checked his phone again. I timed it, 2 minutes of silent scrolling before he spoke. We're going to have a family budget meeting today. 2 p.m. sharp. He didn't say you're invited. He didn't say you're part of it, he said we're meeting. My heart sank but my face stayed neutral. Later I stepped past his home office and that whiteboard caught my eye, written in bold, family budget planning, 2 p.m. No names. No invite. Just that us against her underline. I dug through my phone, it showed nothing. No email, no text. I overheard Marissa on the phone to their sister, let's just handle this without involving her. Too many cooks. My mind raced. I had fixed the patio lights. I had paid for extra soil when Marissa's back was out. I had been there for years of support and repairs. That morning hit me, being used is one thing. Being disposable is another. Later, in the hallway, I pulled him aside. I asked calmly, why wasn't I included in the 2 p.m. meeting? He said nothing loud, just looked at me the way you look at a dog you're considering giving away. It's nothing personal, he said. But you've stayed longer than courtesy allows. This is a home, not a holding cell. I froze on the spot. Then he finished, your family, but not in the decision chain. I hope you understand. He meant go quietly or you will find yourself out. I held his gaze for a silent beat, then said, I understand, just not in the way you hope. He smiled a slow, thin smile, eyes cold. It'd be best if things didn't get uncomfortable. I left without screaming. I left with that exact phrase ringing, family, but not in the decision chain. That afternoon I locked myself in the guest room. I didn't cry. I didn't stomp. I sat at my laptop. I began writing dates. Late June, paid rent utilities. Early July, bought replacement vacuum. September, groceries, insurance. The list grew. I remembered a professor telling us, the sharpest evidence isn't shouted. It's documented. I found the text where Marissa thanked me, thanks for handling the kids this week. You're a lifesaver. I printed it. I grabbed photos from the driveway when I fixed the car after the hail. I wasn't angry anymore, I was systematic. I called my old colleague and left a voicemail. I need clarity on rights for someone living in a home and making financial contributions. I sat back and looked at the wall. Emotions were quiet, but building. Finally I stood in the hallway mirror. I saw her, the version of me that used to shrink and hope. I didn't smile. I said aloud, I'm not here to be liked anymore. I'm here to be heard. Behind me I heard footsteps. Dorian passed by. He paused, looked at the reflection, then turned away quickly. I didn't flinch. I walked past him with the same quiet certainty I used to avoid. This wasn't about staying. It was about being counted. The lights were low in the dining room when I walked in. The table was set like a victory feast, crisp napkins, polished silverware, candles flickering gently. Aunt Carol sat across from me. Marissa and Dorian were at the head. Their two adult kids sat opposite each other, polite smiles, eyes glancing sideways. I chose the seat at the end, an act mostly unnoticed, but in that room it felt bold. I watched Dorian carry the conversation with that rehearsed tease of someone who expects applause. He said things like "we want harmony, and we've been patient." But then he added, "Let's remember this isn't a hotel." My hands folded quietly, my mind keeping score. They misread my silence as surrender. They always had. I didn't feel small. I felt steady for the first time in years. Halfway through, Dorian looked at me and said, "We've been more than accommodating, Laurie. I hope you don't force things into ugliness." The fork clinked against the plate. I didn't blink. I leaned forward, voice calm. "Courtesy works both ways," I said. "You've had yours. Now it's my turn." Marissa's face tightened. Aunt Carol placed her fork down silently. The air got thick. I locked eyes with Dorian and added, "If this turns into war, make sure you're packed. Because I'm not fighting with chairs this time." His smile stayed, thin, but his eyes cooled. Then he said softly, "Your family, but not in the decision chain. I hope you understand." I stood up. Didn't raise my voice. Didn't walk out. I just stepped back, bag of dignity still intact. Later, I went to the guest room. My phone sat on the dresser. I opened voice memos. The one labeled closet hang caught my ear. I pressed play. It was the murmur of Dorian's voice in the hallway earlier that afternoon. "We'll push her until she leaves. She won't fight." Marissa's unsure voice, "But she paid half of the bills." Dorian replied, "She's always emotional. Let her cry herself out. We can fix it later, legally." What knives couldn't do, this recording did. I sat still. No tears. Just the hush of watchfulness. I didn't feel paranoid anymore. I felt prepared. I opened my notebook and began jotting timestamps. 1:12 p.m. hallway, 1:33 p.m. kitchen over here, 2:05 p.m. call recorded. I remembered my father's words, "If you must fight, be the last one standing, not the first one yelling." I texted the attorney friend, "I'm in. I'll need an affidavit." Then I packed a small bag, not because I was leaving, but because I was ready for whatever came next. I told myself, they didn't see me. But I see them. And I remember better than they gamble. I left the bag by the closet and headed out the front door. On the kitchen island I left a printed quote, "Sometimes you don't need to slam the door. Just make sure it closes behind you." The street felt wide under the porch light. I wasn't walking away. I was choosing distance. I came back to the house that afternoon for one reason, to grab a file folder I'd forgotten in the hall closet. It was supposed to be in and out. But nothing's simple when you're walking through a minefield you used to call home. Dorian was already in the kitchen. Leaning against the counter like he was waiting. My phone was in his hand, unlocked. He twirled it once and said, "You really should be careful where you leave this. Voice memos open like that? Things can come back to bite." He didn't look angry. Just smug. I didn't flinch. They usually bite the one who said them. There was a moment where the silence cracked. He wasn't used to me holding eye contact. He stepped closer, still polite on the outside. "Rumors, Laurie. They travel faster than the truth. Especially when family's involved. Might be smart to watch what gets shared. For everyone's sake." I just nodded once. Calm. Measured. "Then I hope the truth gets to them first." He didn't follow me when I walked away. But I felt it. That line between passive aggression and full-blown retaliation? He just crossed it. By sundown, the retaliation had a face. My old landlord left me a voicemail. "Hey Laurie, just wanted to let you know someone's pulling your rental history, said it was a job background check, but that felt off. Thought you should know." Then came the text from Marissa. A screenshot of a conversation between me and her, except half of it was altered. Words I never typed, twisted just enough to make me sound manipulative. Emotional. Irrational. I sat there, holding the phone, not even mad. Not even surprised. I had expected this. I had planned for worse. I opened my journal. Wrote another line under today's date: never wrestle with a pig. You both get dirty, and the pig likes it. That weekend, they hosted brunch. The usual family event with casseroles and too much syrup and not enough sincerity. I wasn't invited. I showed up anyway. I waited until everyone had sat down. Then I stood up, napkin still folded, voice steady. I'm not here to fight, I said. And I'm not here to tear the family apart. But I will no longer be the carpet you wipe your dirt on. Eyes widened. A fork clinked against a plate. Marissa froze mid-sip. I know things have been said. I know what's been planned. And I have documentation, not to shame anyone, but to protect myself. I didn't mention Dorian's voice. But I didn't have to. The implication was enough. I'm filing for a property agreement. Legally protecting my share. This isn't about revenge. This is about surviving with dignity. The room split in half. A few looked down. Some fidgeted. Marissa looked like she'd forgotten how to breathe. Afterward, in the kitchen, Aunt Carol stood by the sink. She hadn't said a word during brunch. But now she turned to me. I've seen how they talk to you, she said quietly. I didn't speak up, but I knew. I didn't thank her. I didn't smile. I just said, then speak now. Because silence lets them stay this way. She nodded. I'll tell your lawyer what I know about the house. Who paid what? Who signed what? And that was the moment everything shifted. Not because she agreed to help. But because, for once, I wasn't standing alone. That night, I laid everything out on the table in my temporary apartment. Photos. Screenshots. Statements. Texts. Audio timestamps. I mapped it like a case. Then I texted my lawyer friend, the game's open now. Let's begin the real move. This was no longer about staying or leaving. This was about not being erased. I walked into the living room thinking I'd take part in a family meeting, just one more conversation about ownership, expectations, maybe an acknowledgement of everything. Instead, I found a slideshow projected on the wall. A new ownership structure, Dorian called it. There I was on the screen, my name crossed out in red, his name highlighted in bold. The room went still. Marissa's brow furrowed. Aunt Carol shifted in her seat. The family looked shocked, confused, like they were seeing a ghost they'd helped conjure. Dorian cleared his throat and said, we all agreed to simplify the estate. Here's what Laurie truly earned. That phrasing, truly earned, hit me hard. I inhaled slowly and looked at them all, cousins, nieces, nephews, switching glances. They thought I'd accept it quietly. They thought I'd disappear. But I didn't. I felt something click. This isn't a defeat. It's a wake up. Dorian handed out printed contract copies. My name, signature, dated earlier than the deed we all thought controlled everything. He smiled. See? All legally valid. Nice try, Laurie. My jaw dropped only a fraction. My mind raced. Who helped him? Who signed off while I slept? But I didn't show panic. I reached into my bag and held up a flash drive. Here's the rest of the story. The gasp that followed echoed like wind in an empty corridor. Marissa rose, starting to protest, but Dorian shot her a look and she froze. I pressed play. On the screen, two silhouettes in a dim room, voices I knew too well. Let her sob herself out. We'll file the papers next week. I watched eyes widen. I watched Dorian's face drain of color. My grip tightened on the remote. Teddy Roosevelt's words came back, speak softly and carry a big stick. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just let truth play while they listened. Later, the attorney Royce stood near the doorway. We'll schedule custody changes for the property immediately. My Aunt Carol nodded at me from the back corner. Marissa sat stunned. Dorian didn't get up, he sat frozen. I didn't look back. I exited quietly. As I passed Marissa, I leaned in and whispered, don't underestimate silences. They're the loudest messages. I didn't celebrate. The war isn't over, but the board has been turned. People changed sides. I packed up my bag and left the room. Outside, the night air felt clean. For the first time in a long time, I felt weightless and anchored. I wasn't invisible anymore. I mattered. 2 weeks later, the living room was stripped down to its bones. No photos. No throw pillows. No trace of me ever trying to make this place feel like home. I sat on the hardwood floor next to a half-sealed box labeled in thick black marker, Laurie, passed. It sat there like a quiet witness. Outside, a light autumn rain tapped against the windows, steady and gentle. It felt different now, less like a storm coming, more like something washing away. Dorian was facing charges now. Property fraud. Coercion. The documents were with the DA. Marissa had packed up and moved in with her parents the week after the confession video played. No word from her since. Carol knocked softly before stepping in, holding a pie in both hands, her way of apologizing without saying the word. She set it down and joined me on the floor. "Your mother," she said, "would have been proud of how you stood your ground." I didn't answer right away. I just looked around the room and said, "This was never mine." She nodded. Then she reached into her purse and pulled out an old, rusted key wrapped in a yellowed envelope. "Your mom gave me this years ago," she said. "Said to give it to you when you were ready." I turned it over in my hand, not sure what I was even looking at. "What is it?" "A cabin. Oregon. Last place she owned before she passed. She always said she'd take you one day." Carol's eyes softened. "I didn't tell you back then because, well, we were all still trying to own you in one way or another." "Why now?" I asked quietly. Carol placed a hand over mine. "Because you finally stopped trying to belong to people who didn't earn you." It wasn't the property that made my throat tighten. It was what it meant. A piece of her. A piece of peace. The next day, I loaded the last box into the back of my old Prius. The sky was still gray but lighter than yesterday. One of the neighbors waved from across the street. I waved back. No words exchanged. No need. I closed the hatch and stood still for a minute, staring at the house. Not with longing. Not with anger. Just a final glance at a chapter that taught me how to read the fine print of people's intentions. About an hour north, I stopped for gas and sat in the parking lot of a rest stop with an open bag of trail mix on my lap. I called an old friend. She picked up on the second ring. "Still looking for a co-author?" I asked. She laughed. "Only if you've got stories worth telling." "Oh, I've got a few." The GPS cut in, turn left toward a new beginning. I actually chuckled out loud. As I drove, the world felt bigger. My car wasn't packed with just things, it carried all the versions of me that survived. Not all of them would make it to Oregon. Some were getting off at this exit. In the last hour of daylight, I finally let myself feel the full weight of leaving. But it didn't crush me. It grounded me. "You can't change how they treated you," I said softly to no one, "but you can change what you tolerate." I thought about how many people live like I did, waiting for someone to finally see them. To stop walking over them. To stop rewriting their story. Here's the thing, the second half of your life? That's not for making everyone else comfortable. That's for becoming who you were too tired to be before. Not everyone gets that chance. I almost didn't. And sometimes the win isn't loud. Sometimes it's just closing a door and knowing you'll never walk back through it. I'm Laurie. I survived the family that raised me, and I found the one I'm building. This wasn't the end of my story. It was just the part where I finally became the author.